Hello, my name is Annette DeLu, and you are listening to The Heart of You. Today is episode 53, and I am welcoming Dr. Tricia Wolanin. She is a clinical psychologist, author, sound healer, and creativity coach. And more importantly, she's a really good friend. I met Tricia through friends of friends from Chicago, and she just happened to be moving to Paris, and they connected us, and we kind of hit it off right away. So I would like to welcome you to the show, Tricia. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Annette. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really appreciative you're having me on here today.
Yeah, of course. What we're here to talk about today is the Camino de Santiago. This is a really cool topic for me because I don't know a whole lot about it. I know little bits and pieces. We interviewed Sonia Choquette earlier in the
Mm,
season, and I know that throughout her book, Waking Up in Paris, she talks a lot about going on the
mm,
Camino for actually two different times in her life. So that was
mhm,
actually the first time I'd even heard of it. And then I met you, Trisha, and all of a sudden you're talking about the Camino de Santiago. And I was like, oh, wait a minute,
mhm.
I know about this. Yeah, we're going to discuss everything about what it is all about, why people walk the Camino de Santiago, why it's a pilgrimage, all of those things. But before we dive into that, Trisha, tell us a little bit about your spiritual awakening story.
Yeah, so my spiritual awakening story, I feel like happened a little over a dozen years ago. I was in the midst of turning 30, and I felt like I had everything that American society says you should want. So I had just bought a house with a three-car garage. I was engaged. I had a well-paying job, but I was feeling unfulfilled. And what I realized is I was lacking that sense of spirituality and having any kind of spiritual life in general. And so I had moved to Hawaii at that time. And when I moved there, I was working with a lot of active duty military, all had trauma, all had PTSD. My fiance at that time was dealing with grief. His mother had just died. And so everyone around me was miserable. And I was in this beautiful place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then that's when I tried to start meditating, but what really deepened it is I took a yoga philosophy, a 1 week yoga philosophy course, and this person introduced me to the importance of having a guru and Yogananda and also Amma, the hugging saint.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
My sister absolutely adores Amma. Yeah. I
Oh,
am
really?
familiar with her. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and that is so great. Yeah, so I for some reason that she really Amma really clicked with me, and I ended up moving back to California, and I met Amma, and I started to go on some of her retreats, and I taught yoga at some of her retreats. It was through her practice and darshan she's known as the hugging saint, so she gives hugs, but something in her awakened something in me, and I was able to start a daily meditation practice after that. And so all of it, from the difficulty of feeling like I was lacking something to the yearning for wanting something more, and then finding Amma, helped me build a foundation of having spirituality be part of my life.
That's really beautiful because sometimes all it takes is somebody to activate that within you. And a
Mm,
lot of times, a lot of us light workers, we're constantly activating each other, right? So the fact that
yeah.
she activated you, that's so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And I'm sure that you probably gave her some sort of activation as well because it's always reciprocal.
Yeah, that's really a great way of putting it. And I think guru, I don't know the exact definition, but it's something about like the remover of darkness, like someone who dispels like the darkness in your life. And it is like a light worker, right? Like
Yeah.
so yeah, so she opened up something in me, which was really beautiful, and I'm so appreciative of that.
Oh, what a beautiful story. I love that.
Oh, thank you.
So then you moved to Paris
Hmm.
from where?
From England. So I was working in England for 8.5 years.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so then that's when you and I met, was when you
Yeah.
decided to move to Paris. And When we first met, you started talking about the Camino de Santiago.
Mm.
So, how did you first discover the Camino de Santiago, and how did you first decide to start exploring it?
Yeah. I first heard about it. I did a backpacking trip like after I got my doctorate when I was 25 years old, like a backpacking trip in Europe. And I met this mother and son who were doing the Camino de Santiago. And I found that really fascinating. And over the years, especially when I moved to England and I would travel in different parts of Europe, I would meet other people who did the Camino de Santiago. And I thought that was something that intrigued me, but it's 500 miles long. So it also scared me
Yeah, rightfully so.
because I feel like people who do the full thing are like marathon ultra runners, like they do all of that stuff. And that's not me. So I thought it was out of my potential to do that. But
Right.
I met someone actually at the Shakespeare bookstore many years ago who she's an American and she would do part of it every year because to do 500 miles, it takes quite a lot, at least a month, if not a little longer. And
Oh,
we
I'm
don't
sure,
always,
yeah.
yeah, as Americans or just people always have the time off to do it, or yeah, maybe just don't want to physically do the whole 500 miles at one time. So she put the idea in my head that you could do it in your own way. You could do a little bit each time, and collectively it could add up to the whole path. And so as I was thinking of leaving my job and I was about to leave my job and move to Paris, I had that goal of wanting to start at least one part of the Camino de Santiago. And I signed up. I wanted to do it earlier in 2020, and then the pandemic happened. And so it was delayed
Mm.
till 2021. And I did it actually with the group for the last 120 kilometers. So from Sarria in Spain to Santiago, which you need at least 100 kilometers to get like a little certificate of completion. And so I did that with a group.
Cool. So, where does it start and where does it end?
Yeah. So there's actually multiple paths. There's multiple caminos, but the most popular one is the Camino Frances, and that starts at Saint John Pied de Port in the south of France,
Mhm.
close to the Pyrenees. So that's the most common path. But there's Portuguese way, Norte way. So there's multiple paths, but the traditional one starts there in Saint John Pied de Port.
Okay, got it. And then it
Mhm.
ends.
The traditional one, it ends in Santiago de Compostela,
Okay.
which yeah, but sometimes people choose to go a little bit further because they just get addicted to the walking and wanting to go to a different place. So sometimes people choose to end a little bit further than that in Finisterre or Muxia.
So, if you were to choose to do just a portion of it, would you go from the beginning or would you go sort of
Yeah,
like
that's
100 kilometers from Santiago? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
so you would actually get there. That's okay.
If I was going to do it, just a one portion of it, it would be the path I did the first time, which is from Sarria to Santiago de Compostela. And
Mhm.
I think that's the most populated one because you do that sort of finish line and you do get that certificate of completion and you meet so many other people that are doing it at that time too. So that would be my recommendation.
The Camino de Santiago is a pilgrimage of sorts. And
Mhm.
so you walk from either the beginning or, like you said, you
Mhm.
take various different parts and then until you get to Santiago. So, why did people do this? What is the history of
Mhm.
what started this to begin with?
Yeah, so the history is supposedly, so it's called Camino de Santiago, and the town it ends up in is in Santiago de Compostela, which has the remains of Saint James, supposedly, in that's in this church. And so I believe in the ninth century, his remains were found and taken to this area in Santiago, and they built a temple around it and then a cathedral, and people began pilgrimaging since the ninth century to there. So I believe even in the Canterbury Tales, the people that are pilgrims there were
Mm.
pilgrimaging to there as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so there are paths even from Paris. There's a path from Notre Dame. There's paths so many different places in Europe. Even I heard people might even walk from Israel to there. So many different places to get
Wow.
yeah, to get to this place. It's one of the most popular pilgrimages. Before there was this Camino de Santiago in pagan times, there was this pilgrimage to Finisterre or Fistere, which was known as the end of the earth. And so I think pagans believed at that time that's where the veil between worlds was really light. And so people would
Oh,
pilgrimage, yeah, to that place to make offerings to the gods at those times. So currently, people might still go past Santiago de Compostela to another 80 kilometers to Finisterre to this site as well. And then other people have also said that the Camino de Santiago lays on ley lines, so the energy lines of the earth, and it's along the Milky Way line. So there's a lot of other traditions that have their foot along this path over the years.
right. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's really fascinating because that's something I want to explore on this podcast actually
Hmm.
is all the various different places on earth where you have
Mm.
these energy centers, where you have these places where the veil is thinner, where a lot
Mm.
of ancient people would gather and connect with people on the other side and do their rituals and all sorts of other things.
Mm.
So this is fantastic for people to
Oh,
know
great.
because if they are thinking about going to a place that is in Europe,
Mhm.
I would imagine it's probably similar to, let's say, Sedona in the United States or something
Mhm.
like that, where you
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
that really thinly veiled
Yeah.
place where the energy is just really positive and you can connect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's really, really beautiful and really fascinating. And you could still see in that whole region, which is the region where it ends, Galicia, was also Celtic in origin. It was one of the few Celtic nations. And so
Mm.
there's yeah, so even though it's Spain, there's a Celtic influence there. And a lot of different places have little images or little statues of witches or brujas that are like guarding their stores or their cafes throughout that region. So there's like a mysticism there that makes it different than other parts of Spain, primarily the Galicia, this the ending point of Santiago.
Wow. Oh, that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah. So what do you gain from the experience in doing the pilgrimage? So for you, what did it do for you?
Hmm. For me, I think what I thought it would do is different than what it did.
Mm.
I was going to it to find an answer, and this was going to be a one time thing that I was going to check off my bucket list. And I was surprised that I went again this year. And then this year I did the Santiago to Finisterre part
Oh,
with
cool.
yeah, so I did that part with a friend. And so I realized that I think Paulo Coelho said this too, because he also did the pilgrimages. Once you're a pilgrim, you're always a pilgrim. And I feel like there's always going to be that calling for
Mm.
me that I'm a seeker. And so it's a metaphorical, for me, a metaphorical representation of life and the journeys that we go through and the sacrifices we make and the people that we meet and the simplicity in one's life. And for me, what was really interesting is it really humbles you. It was the only thing that I ever experienced, especially the first time I went with the group. Like I've gone to so many yoga retreats or meditation retreats or psychology conferences, and there's usually some type of hierarchy or competitiveness there.
Mm.
And yeah, and for this, it was like the great equalizer because everyone smelled, everyone was dealing with like some type of physical injury, everyone had emotional stuff coming out. And so it was an individual journey, but there was a collectivity going on. You were all in this together, and there was like beauty in the suffering in some ways. When I first did it, I thought I might never do it again. And you really surprise yourself of like what you can physically overcome and how you cheer other people on. And
Mm.
it's really beautiful. And one thing that everyone does on the path, or the people you meet on the path, everyone says buen camino. So you look everyone in the eye and say buen camino to fellow travelers, or if you're going to different stores or cafes or where you're staying, everyone's greeting you like a good walk for the day. And so it's
Mm.
really, yeah, it's a way that you connect with humanity in a different way that doesn't happen, I think, every more in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was very humbling, and it was very connecting you with nature and other people, and just ongoing, like a contemplative walk or contemplative meditation while you're walking throughout all these days, however many days you choose to walk.
And how did you feel like you were called to do this? I mean, what kind of pull did you have toward it? Was it just
Mm.
to accomplish it? Was it a spiritual pull? What was it exactly?
I think it was wanting to accomplish it and also a spiritual pull as well, because I met so many people over the years that have done this. And
Mm.
there, yeah, there's the movie The Way. I don't know if you saw that with Martin Sheen, which so many people, that was their first introduction to the Camino de Santiago, which is also called The Way.
Oh, I'll have to take a look at that. Yeah, no, I
Oh,
don't think I've
yeah.
seen that movie.
Oh, it's really great. Even though, yeah, it's fictional. It's a good representation because everyone chooses to walk for so many different reasons, whether they're in a transitional phase of their life, whether they're retiring or they're reaching a certain age, or they're dealing with some kind of loss or addiction or breakup, whatever it is, or just
Mm.
questioning and wanting to walk out your questions. I think a lot of people do it for different reasons. But one of the people I met years ago, actually it was here in Malaga. I met her at a hostel. She was a social worker, and I cannot remember what Nordic country she was from. But she had said many years ago, like starting 30 years ago, in this Nordic country, she worked at like a juvenile jail. And so, one thing that they offered these people that were sort of inmates, these young youth that were inmates at this jail, is the opportunity to walk the Camino with a social worker. So they would have to write an essay. And
Mm.
if they chose to walk it, that was their time served.
Right.
And so for so many years, like it totally changed people's lives. And so she was doing an interview with one of the first people who did this walk, this Camino. And after she did an interview, like 30 years later, 40 years later, and he, as she was talking with him, he totally stopped what he was doing and went back to do it again because it changed his life so much and it reminded him of the impact of his life, that he
Wow.
went to do it again. And so that always stayed with me, just hearing how that country and that government trusted those social workers and those kids to do this path, which was really strenuous and difficult, but they knew that it would make a change in their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I found that really beautiful. And so I wanted to do that for myself in some capacity, is like make this change and see what it was all about.
Yeah. What was
Yeah.
the most surprising thing you experienced while doing it?
Surprising. I think it was way more physically demanding than I expected. And I
Mm.
think, yeah, it was especially the first year. Now I feel more prepared, but the first year I wore like hiking boots,
Mm.
and you're meant to just wear like tennis shoes or good walking shoes. And the boots were too heavy. And like after the first day, I felt like, which maybe we walked 25 kilometers, I don't know. But I felt like I couldn't even walk the next day because there were a lot of hills.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you knew that you had how many more days to go, like, there was no getting out of it. I, like, really prayed to my angels and guides, like, I was praying to my angels and guides to just help me walk and get through the day because I felt, like, so physically, yeah, not in the right place.
Right.
So I was really surprised, and, this time around, I wore the right shoes, and it was okay. But also, what was surprising is the people that you meet along the way, and just how beautiful so many people's stories were that they were sharing on this path. And
Mm.
yeah, like those people you might remain friends with for a long time. And you're only on this journey for a little bit, but you share so much of your lives on this path together. I
Right.
was with a group, but I hear people who choose to do it on their own. They will just find other people and they'll travel with and share their stories and become friends for life. And so I think it was like the camaraderie that occurs on that I wasn't really expecting.
Oh, that's really beautiful. How many people
Mm,
did you sort of come across? I mean, was it super crowded or did you just kind of come across
mm.
people every so often? Like, I mean, how many people when you were
Oh,
there?
yeah. The first time I did it, I was with a group of 15, but there were a lot. It was very crowded. So the Saria to Santiago part is really crowded. So
Mm.
I looked up an estimate. So in 1985, just to show you how much this pilgrimage has grown, there were 1,245 people who did this pilgrimage that you need at least 100 kilometers. 2021, there were 179,000 people. Yeah,
Wow.
that completed it. And that was like also during the pandemic that wasn't totally open the whole time. Yeah,
Right.
so there were a lot of people that you came across, and there were sometimes groups of people that you would see, but sometimes I saw the same people. Like I saw a couple that had their dogs that they brought
Oh,
along,
cool.
or some that brought their kids, and so you would notice the same people and say hello.
Right.
This time when I went from Santiago to Finisterre, there weren't as many people on that path. So it was a little, yeah, a little bit more secluded.
Right.
And I think all the different routes I hear, like especially the earlier parts, it's not as crowded because not everyone does the whole thing, but the last part is a little bit crowded.
Got it.
Yeah. And depending on the time of year too.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because you wouldn't
Mhm.
want to necessarily do it when it's like crazy, ridiculously hot.
No,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So, what do you think it is about that physical breaking point? So,
Mm.
the reason why I'm asking this is because obviously you have the spiritual aspect of the Camino in and of itself, being
Mm.
on ley lines and being sort of a spiritual place. But then in addition to that, there is something about like putting your body through a physical breaking point that actually almost like kind of breaks you open energetically.
Mm.
And so I'm curious about like what that was like for you, if that kind of, because you did say you were like you're surprised how physical it was, and it's true. Like you think that, oh, like, well, I live in Paris and now you live in Malaga, but it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I could walk 10 kilometers every single day
Really?
easily,
Yeah.
and so why wouldn't I be able to do 20 every day? Like that seems like it would be pretty easy, but
Yeah.
it is very, very challenging.
No, you're right, and I think it's yeah, it's challenging. I think it goes back to like the humility, and it's like
Mm.
the breaking down of ego. I think that was a lot, you know,
Yeah.
that was a lot that I realized with this path is like you're breaking down of your ego, and when you're physically challenged, you you rely on other people as well, whether it's like for getting some Tylenol or painkillers, or sharing a wrap, or just cheerleading each other on this journey. I know this past summer, Isabella and I, when we were doing the Camino, one day it was torrential rain the whole day, and it was even
Mm.
raining sideways, and we had waterproof shoes. Water
Oh,
slid
wow.
in. Yeah, water slid in because it was raining sideways. And so for us to get through that, it was like September, we sang Christmas songs, or like pop songs from the 80s and 90s, because we
Nice.
mentally had to get to a different place
Yeah.
to get through that difficulty. And so I think it's almost like your body breaks down and you have to like surpass that. Like it breaks down your ego. You have to look
Mm.
at how you can get past the physical challenges and the environmental challenges, lean on
Mhm.
other people. So again, lowering the ego to accept assistance where needed.
Mm.
I know like last year when I was doing this, I brought some tuning forks with me,
Mm.
and yeah, which is interesting because I used it on myself, but other people who had some physical stuff going on, I used it on them. And so I think, yeah, there's a reliance on each other a little bit, like I said, cheerleading each other on, or just knowing that, yeah, you'll get through this together, or people slowing down to be with you, if you need assistance and stuff. So that was really beautiful. And I think, like I said, like I'm a very independent person, and it's difficult to ask for assistance or ask for help, and
Mm.
like the breaking down of everything, like you need that, and it's beautiful to receive that from other people.
And it's also that connection that you're talking about with other
Mm,
people is something that we don't often get right now in society.
yeah.
We have connections, through the internet, like Facebook groups or
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram, people you follow, that kind of thing, but that's not connection. It's not the
Mm-mm.
same thing in any way. And of course, you can create and cultivate your own connections within your homes and where you live and friends and that kind of thing. But the
Mhm.
type of connection that you're talking about is it's a shared experience
Yeah.
that creates a bond
Mhm.
that is pretty strong. It's pretty strong when
Yeah.
you create a bond like that. And
Yeah.
it's definitely necessary, I think, in this day and age to be able to have these outlets for people to come together, because I'm sure that everybody who was on the Camino at the same time you were all in different places spiritually.
Mhm.
Maybe some people weren't even spiritual at all. You never know. Like,
Yeah.
you never know
Yeah.
where people are on their journey and why
Yeah.
they're deciding to do this, but for whatever reason, they're feeling just as pulled as you were to be there at that exact place at that exact time.
Yeah. No, and it's so, you're totally right. And so beautiful that, again, that shared experience just really surprised me. The people I met, there was one person who was in my group last year. She was from Boston. I think she's part of she has three siblings, like a quadtuplet, or she's one of four, and she's never alone. She was always surrounded by people. I think she has a fiance. So she's never traveled alone or anything. And she did this trip with another family member, but
Mm,
this year she went alone, and it was like her first trip alone. Like, the Camino pulled her back from Boston to do another path. And again, I think that, and I don't think she was doing it for spiritual reasons, but it opens it opens something up in people, with regardless of why you were pulled to it. And I think it continues to, like, once you do it, it continues to pull at you, which is really interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, and one of the other things I didn't share on here too is, depending on the path, like, you just follow the path. There are these arrows that shows the way that you're supposed to go. And what
Mm,
is really interesting at this is all that is, like, you don't have any other responsibility, especially if you're taking vacation or holiday from work or whatever. And the only thing that is asked of you is to get from your destination, your lodging, from one night to the next night. And
sure.
so you just follow the signs. You just follow the signs. And in certain parts of the journey, people have written like little graffiti stuff, but with motivational things like walk to the answer, or you can do it, or the answer is within. So it's like beautiful things that are continuing to pull you forward. And because so many people have done this path for hundreds of years, you feel that, like, energetic pull, even though you think you physically might not be able to do it, like, you're being pulled by the people that are with you, the people who have gone before for hundreds of years.
It's that support
Yeah.
of all of the ancestors and all of the people who have done it
Yeah.
prior to you. That's really,
Yeah.
oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really amazing.
Obviously, when you went with the group, I imagine that you sort of booked all of your things together. But if
Hmm.
you were to do this on your own, would you have to sort of book the places of lodging ahead of time, or can you just sort of roll up in a town and just stay
Hmm.
somewhere?
I've been listening to other podcasts about the Camino, and I think because it's gotten so popular over the years, especially post pandemic, I think a lot of people are yearning to be in nature again and wanting
Yeah.
something more. And so it's getting very popular. So I hear it's important to book ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so there's different variations. They have anything from hostels, which they call albergues for people who are on the pilgrimage,
Hmm.
to like bed and breakfast or hotels and stuff like that. And so there are also other companies that exist which you could do a tour with, or they might just book your lodging.
Okay.
And some of them, if you know, they do a luggage service too. So if you don't want to be carrying everything with you for that week or however long you do it, they'll transport your luggage from one hotel to the next.
That's kind of important because you don't want to be carrying everything with you if you
Yeah.
are not somebody who packs light.
Yeah, no. And so I think, yeah, like, I was like a little bit judgmental of myself initially, because I'm like, I need to do this whole thing, the whole 500 miles, and list carried everything with me. And luckily, both of these times, I did have my luggage carried from one spot to the other, and I was really appreciative of that. And however you
Yeah.
choose to do the Camino, I think it's still your journey, and even one day can feel like a lot. So it's all flexible,
Mm.
and it's up to you of how you want to choose to do the journey. You don't have to compare yourself to anyone else.
And you know what? That's a really good statement to make for
Mhm.
life. not just for the
Yeah.
Camino, right?
Yeah. No,
It's
totally. Totally.
beautiful advice
Totally.
to live by. Absolutely.
Yeah. Totally.
Incredible. I would like to have our listeners know a little bit about you and what you do. So, you are a sound healer, and I have been to one of your sound baths, which are absolutely incredible. And
Well, thank you.
so beautiful.
Thank you.
Right now, you're living in Malaga. You just moved to
Mhm.
Malaga from Paris. You were feeling
Mhm.
called to move there. And yeah, so why don't you give us a brief overview of what you're doing now and how people can find you?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. So you can find me right now on Instagram at drtricia.co. I am going to be starting or in the midst of starting a blog actually called A Modern Pilgramage. And it's going to be a little bit talking about the different types of pilgrimages that we take. So, whether it's religious or spiritual or to natural places, intentional travel or inner journeys. So things like sound healing and meditation and yoga, or different ways that creativity, like art and books, can take us on different journeys and music. And so I'm trying to incorporate all of these different loves and passion and education together. So I'll be hoping to do workshops and retreats, whether virtually and in person in Malaga. I might do some in the States coming up as well, but I'll have all of that on my Instagram and hopefully this site here in the near future.
I cannot wait to see how this site develops, because when you first told me about it, I was so ecstatic for you, because it's
Oh,
just, I think it's going to come together beautifully. So, yeah, I can't wait to see what
thank
happens.
you. Thank you. I'm super excited as well.
Wonderful. So, if you are in Malaga and you would like to contact Trisha, you can follow her on Instagram at Dr. Tricia. So, it's DrTricia dot
.co.
co.
Hmm.
If you are in the US and you're following her Instagram, you can find out when she's going to be there as well. We will put the website in the show notes, because as we're recording this, of course, we always record these way far ahead of time. Here we are currently in January, and this episode is actually going to be airing in March. So by then, Trisha, if you have your website all set up, then we'll put that in the
Hmm.
show notes, and people can start to experience all of the information for your blog.
Perfect. I'm excited.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much for joining me today. It's been such a
Yeah.
pleasure to speak with you.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. I feel really honored to be on here.
Lovely. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Have an amazing day, and never stop exploring your soul, because it is the most important relationship you will ever have. If you are interested in learning more about me and the sessions that I do, feel free to go to my website at infinitesoullove.com. On all social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Infinite Soul Love 1111. Hey, and if you feel called, I would love it if you could rate The Heart of You on whatever streaming service you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please take a moment, give it a review. It really does help the channel. Thanks so much.